Welcome to Where You're At, a podcast that highlights the work of alumni from the Journalism and Media Studies Department at San Diego State University. I'm Pete Frank Williams. Our goal is to share the success of alums, inspire current students with these stories, and connect students and alums for mentoring. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
Coming up this week on Where You At, we are staying in America's finest city. We're going from Montezuma Mesa to downtown. We're going to talk political communication. Our guest this week is Nick Serrano. He's a San Diego State alum, and he is the Deputy Chief of Staff to San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. Very kind of Nick to take time out of his busy day. Welcome to the Where You At podcast, Nick.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
So with a lot of these podcasts, I don't normally like to go in chronological order, but your story is interesting, Nick. And so I want to start with this. You began your work in public service as a teenager, either while you were at Eastlake High School or shortly thereafter. You worked in community relations for the San Diego County District Attorney's Office. And so I'm wondering, what was it about your upbringing? What was it about your teenage years? What was it about that made you decide, I want to get involved in public service?
It's kind of a confluence of different things, to be quite honest. It really started off with my mom told me I needed to get a job. And so my mom she worked for the county of San Diego for a number of years. And so she was in these, spaces where she was hearing that they were looking for student workers. And so she was basically like, you need to get off the couch and go make some money. I'm tired of paying for all these things for you. And so she actually was in touch with the district attorney's office at the time, and knew that they were looking for student workers. And so she kind of just came home one day and said, "Hey, so you're going to work for the DA's office?" And she said, "You're going to be setting up press conferences." And 16, 17-year-old me, I figured that was more manual labor than anything. So like physically setting up the podium and doing all that kind of stuff. Come to find out, it was really more of the professional PR side of it. And so they had me doing, I remember they had me doing the e-newsletter for the DA's office. And at the time, too, social media was just kind of really coming about. So they had me create the DA's first MySpace page, which that was a thing back then. And then, we branched off into other things as well. So I remember that they just had me do a lot of sort of that new and innovative stuff for, what was 2006, 2005, maybe. And so, I saw I was tangentially sort of like in the space where they were doing media relations and, doing press releases and talking with reporters. And it was really there that I opened my eyes to just how this as a profession, PR is able to shape a lot of the public mood and public worldview. And when you factor in that, it's a government service, so we're really telling people about what they need to know. In the case of the DA's office, about how we're keeping them safe and how we are prosecuting criminals and all of that. Add in, being able to create community outreach programs that, get to reach people and let them know that the DA's office isn't about just, trying to find out when you do something wrong or bad or something like that, but really is about crime prevention and keeping you safe. I was able to really sense that this is a space where you can really communicate to the public that, your government is working for you, your government is doing stuff that's good for you. And, I wanted to be part of that, being able to shape that sort of perspective with members of the media. So that's what ended up inspiring me at the end of the day to pursue this line of work and to stay in government communications because, I believe in government. I know that it can do good. And it's about now sharing with the public about how we are effectively serving them.
So not only have you worked for the district attorney's office, but at some point you worked at the public defender's office, you worked for the probation department. Yeah. And I'm wondering whether those things were specific by design so that you can kind of see both sides or all sides, or whether that was just kind of a coincidence that you ended up seeing things from both sides of that equation.
Yeah, no, it was intentional. There was a part of me that, knew that I wanted to go into government communications, but working at the DA's office, I just saw such the power of the work that they do in terms of, putting bad people, behind bars. And so there was a part of me that considered going to law school and becoming a prosecutor. And really the journey over to the public defender's office was about to see the other side. And I loved my time at the public defender's office. I think that is very thankless work that they do over there. That's not only just in terms of the workload that they have. But it was really, I will say, to be honest, just a true eye-opening experience in terms of the haves and the haves not of the criminal justice system is what I will say. But it was really just to shape out that worldview, to say that, I've seen the prosecutor side. Let me see now what public defenders do. And then probation was an interesting stint as well. Just again, trying to really wrap my arms around, this criminal justice system that, I was interested in based off my time at the DA's office, but I was able to see, what we do once we actually have people, who have been, rehabilitated, need a little bit more work, and have some supervision in the community. But at the end of the day, I mean, it all came down to sort of why I do this work. It's all about helping people at the end of the day and showing them that government can work for them.
So you went to San Diego State, and full disclosure, Nick was not part of the School of Journalism and Media Studies. He was a political science major, but he also took classes from JMS. And I think that just what you do now, working in communications and shaping public policy, is really important for that students can learn from it. Let's discuss some of those JMS classes that you did take and sort of the skills that you learned in there and how those are applicable to you today.
I will absolutely confess that, it's, as much as I appreciate having a political science degree, one of my biggest regrets about my time in college was that I didn't get a journalism and media studies degree. So to those folks who have been fortunate to find that program, keep at it. It's a great program. I just to be short about it, I had just done too much in terms of my general education to be able to overhaul it to become a JMS major. I was a transfer student from Southwestern College in Chula Vista. And so, by the time that I had gotten to San Diego State, I'd already done basically my 60 units of general education. And it was all in sort of towards a political science degree. I got to San Diego State and just was able to see this whole new world of things that you can actually major in. And journalism and media studies with emphasis in PR was one of them. And so, I tried to see if I could overhaul it and maybe get a minor, but ultimately, I just kind of sailed too far down. But I still wanted to get the time and the time in to learn some critical aspects of that JMS had to offer. I think the first class that I took was JMS 480, Principles of Public Relations, with Dr. Bailing Shah. Shout out to Dr. Shah. She's an incredible professor, and I know she's doing great things where she's at now. But she was definitely the first person that really got me inspired to pursue that degree. And then, took other classes, JMS 220 with Dr. Smith-Weiss, and then I remember management of media organizations with Laura Sicolo, who's over at the UT. And, all of that just really helped me, I think, do two things. It helped me solidify the fact that this is the profession that I want to do, because I was actually excited to go to class. I was actually excited to actually be reading about, this stuff. I was fascinated by just the mere notion that there's this whole world of study into this, part of the business, right? Just about communications and public relations, and that there's just been so many, textbooks written about it, and there's strategies behind it. Coming from, a transfer, institution, you don't really think about all of the different worlds of study that can be out there. You're kind of just in the general, sort of math, English, political science, business, whatever. But then there's just so much more out there when you get to a place like San Diego State University. And so, yeah, I think the best thing that it did for me was help me become a better writer, part one. I think that's obviously key in this line of work. For all the students who curse the GSP, listen, it's going to take you some time to get there, but it's going to make you better at the end of the day. Because I think you ask any employer today, and I think they will say that being a strong writer, it doesn't matter what profession you go into, is going to be central to you being successful and is just a key asset to have. So as much as grammar, spelling, and punctuation is annoying, trust me, it's an everyday thing that I have to deal with, and that I'm constantly going back to some of the stuff that I learned in studying for the GSP. Yeah, I mean, I think I still have textbooks that, I have on my shelf. I don't know if I've ever pulled them out, but I just think certainly what students get out of JMS is a real-time, practical knowledge and application of that in their day-to-day studies. And I think that's essential. It's not something that I think you will easily forget as you go on into your professional life.
For people who are thinking about working in political communications, kind of want to get into like what they should know about, how they should prepare themselves. What's the type of skills? What are the type of people who excel at political communication? What do you need to do? What do you need to have inside to excel?
Well, a couple of things. I will say it was always fascinating to me when I was in JMS classes because, all of us as students, we used to talk about what kind of PR that we wanted to go into. I was without question in the minority. I think I was the only person who said I wanted to go into public affairs. Everybody else was, I want to be lifestyle, I want to be entertainment, I want to do sports, I want to do business. And I was the one who was like, no, I want to go into government. I acknowledged right then that all of them were going to make more money than me. And, at the end of the day, it's not why I got into this business, but good on them. For a job in political communications, I think the biggest thing is I think you have to have a genuine interest in it. And I think by extension of that, you have to be attuned to the news of the day. So, I encourage people to, read newspapers, and subscribe to, media outlets that are putting out daily information, because I think you have to have that to sort of shape out your worldview in terms of what reporters are talking about, what issues are being covered, how the history of those issues is obviously key in all of this too, because it can just shape your approach to everything. You have to have a strong work ethic. I say a lot about this line of work, and it's not just for the communications professionals, but it's really anybody in politics. This isn't a job, it's a lifestyle. I have the tremendous honor of, being one of the people who gets to run the 8th largest city in the country, the 2nd largest in California. The city doesn't sleep, right? There's stuff that is constantly going on. And there, by extension, is a need to be able to constantly inform the public about what's, going on. To that extent, you have to really like what you do. But I think, when you get to a job like this, what you can see is just the real time, every single day, how you're able to make a difference in people's lives. We, as communications people, have the benefit of being able to share those stories and being able to, put those out to the public to let them know that this is the good work that their government is doing for them. But it does take time, and it does take a lot of hard work. And as you might imagine, we have reporters calling us constantly from whatever beat that they're on. And, our policy here is, we respond to basically every media inquiry that we get. We also do the same thing with all of the people who write us, all the residents of the city. So in any case, I think it does take a strong work ethic to do this work as well. And I think it's just a genuine interest in being able to serve the public.
I would sure think that it takes extremely thick skin in order to work in political communication. We live in a society now where it is so confrontational on a daily basis. It gets personal in the mud. What are some of the warnings? I don't want you, if someone's thinking about this line of industry, I don't want you to scare them away, but what warnings should people have if they want to get into political communication?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I would say that that's probably the hardest part about the job currently is the times that we live in. There's divisions, and I think a lot of, I think there's just a lot of, sort of anger out there. And I think the pandemic didn't do us any help in that regard, but again, continue to believe in the good work that government is able to do, all levels of government. So that's where I really say that you do have to have a passion for it. And you're right, you do have to have a thick skin. And it took me a while to sort of develop that, not only just from, sort of a day-to-day grind sort of thing, just about how much work can be involved, but simultaneously, just sometimes the way that things can be reported can be kind of demeaning. And especially when you know that you're working hard, you're doing the best you can, and there's still just, news and information that whether it's misinformed or not, it still gets out there. But I learned a lesson a long time ago that really stuck with me and is something I constantly remind myself of. And I think it's not only just applicable to, this line of work or really any line of work, but I do think it's just a general life lesson. And it's that it's never what you're called, it's what you answer to. People are always going to have something to say, good, bad, or indifferent. But I think ultimately what I try to do is remember why I'm here, remember who I'm here to serve, and remember that, I know that we are consistently working to do good in our city, to make our city the best place that it can be. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we are continuously working in that direction. And we are informed and guided by good values. And making a difference in everyday people's lives. And that's what I always hang my hat on, is the fact that there's going to be criticism. I think government's an easy place for people to get critical of, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's always good to just remember who you are, why you're in this, and what your ultimate goal is, and keep that in mind and persevere and move forward.
There's so many different levels of communication that I find interesting. And from a political standpoint, I'm interested in how you've worked on a campaign and now you work as the deputy chief of staff. How does campaign communication compared to after you win and now you're in the office and that level of communication?
It's a bit of a different grind. Campaign communication tends to be, I also think that like my experience as on the campaign trail was very different than I think a lot of other campaigns. So we ran for mayor in the height of the pandemic. So it was the 2020 election. We had the stay-at-home orders hit right after the mayor had won the primary. And so, if you know anything about campaigns, it really functions on sort of like everyone thinks, it's the knocking on doors, it's the shaking hands, it's the kissing babies. In the pandemic, we had none of that. So you were really reduced to, how you could reach people, just where they were at, which was at home. And so, I think the communications was just heightened. I remember the mayor we did every day, updates on Facebook Live in terms of, trying to just share with the public about what COVID, updates had come down the pike that day. And we did it every day at 8 p.m. And so we made that work. We, tried to roll out, campaigns that were, just highlighting the good people who are doing good work in the community, just to kind of uplift some spirits. It was the mayor's Heart of San Diego Award is what he called it. So, and then, you had sort of like you were trying to generally communicate, the support and the endorsements and all that stuff. So there's really, I guess, in that sense, there's just a more sort of like organizing effort about you're just trying to demonstrate, the support that you're getting, how much money you raised, it's all just kind of like a race to the finish. And so I think from that subject, it's just different. And then, for us, we really had an interesting time with some, news reporting and whatnot that we ended up calling out. So, that's kind of a different sort of grind on the campaign. I would say that in government, it's exactly that. Now you're in the business of governing. So when you win the election, you switch from, the campaign person to the person that's now, governing over the entire city. You're not just trying to speak to your people. You got to speak to everybody, and you got to let them know about what's going on in their community, in every community. So all 9 city council districts in the city, so then that turns into the sort of day-to-day stuff that you may have, street shut down, water main break, planned improvements to their community, policies that were coming out of the mayor's office. So it does take on a different animal. And I would say that the governing part is just key to making it, is the key flip. You're no longer trying to organize and galvanize support per se. What you're doing now is to try and communicate to people about how, now that you've given me this position, this is what I'm doing with it every day to work on your behalf and how I'm getting things done for you. And that's what we try to do.
We're going to be taking a quick break right now, and we'll be coming back with more amazing podcasts. This is P. Frank Williams, class of 1993. You can check out my new show, Hip Hop Homicide, streaming on All Black and airing on WeTV. And now, back to the podcast. Here's Josh.
Another topic that I find fascinating is that, okay, you graduated in class of 2014, correct? From San Diego State. Okay, so you've attained this really important high-profile position very quickly, which speaks a lot to you. Your boss, whether that's the mayor, Todd, Gloria, or other people, they're much older than you. They have more experience than you. But you are the deputy chief of staff, and I think this is really good for students who are first breaking in at any level, but especially in the political communication. What is the key to commanding respect to a boss who is older than you and has more experience than you, but yet you need to give them advice, and maybe it's advice that they don't want to hear? What are some of the lessons that you have learned that enables you to command that respect to someone older than you?
Well, I just want to start off by saying I've been very fortunate and very lucky to have had the trajectory that I have had. I started in this line of work as an intern. And I was, and it was my capstone requirement at San Diego State for political science was an internship in local politics. I interned for then San Diego City Council member Todd Gloria. And the funny story that I like to share is that first time I ever met him was actually when he was serving as the city's interim mayor. And they had asked me to move his stuff out of the mayor's office. And then if you fast forward, I was actually the person that ran his campaign and got him to be able to move his stuff back into the mayor's office. So that's just I think the only thing that I can say is that if you want something bad enough, work for it. Everybody's got the image in their head about what they want to achieve in life, who they want to be. And once you have that in your mind, don't let anybody stop you. Don't let any roadblock, inhibit your progress. You have to figure out how you're going to go over, under, or through a roadblock in order to achieve the life or the success that you want. I've just been fortunate to be able to, really, work hard and dream big in that sense, I guess, and, get to where I am today. So I feel very fortunate in that sense. And I never take any day for granted. But to your question, what I try to just recall is, the amount of work that I've put in to get to a spot like this, the years that I've been with the mayor, from whether he was on the city council to the state assembly to now here. And then, being on the campaign and the vision that he articulated. And so I think it's just really trusting your gut and trusting the experience that you've had, whether that's at San Diego State or leading up to the role that you have, not being afraid to speak up. I've learned that sometimes you could be in a room with folks and you look at them all as like the experts in their field, and they could very well be that. But sometimes when you're making decisions, it's the most basic of questions that can ultimately change the direction or provides that new piece of information that everybody needed to hear. And honestly, I've learned too that most times when you have a question in your mind, there's someone else around the table that has that same question, and they may just be too afraid to speak up or to do that, right? So I always just encourage people just to ask questions, and there's always ways to do that if you don't want to do it in a public setting or anything like that. And then in terms of giving advice, again, you have to trust where you've been, the experiences that you've had, the information that you have in front of you. And, in my job, you think about, what is it that the public expects of us? What is it that they want to see ultimately done? And so then when you do that math and put that all together, it leads you to the space of where you're at. But I would also just reiterate the same thing. I mean, I think the same thing that I said earlier, again, it's never what you're called, it's what you answer to. So I encourage people to just really harness that lesson about, being, content, with who you are, the role that you have, and that you've worked hard to get there. And so you have to embrace that.
What I like about this podcast, even though I've just started it, is that I get to learn about these different industries that I normally would not get to know. And politics is definitely one of those. Most of what I know about politics, I learned watching The West Wing, which probably shows a lot about my naiveness. But I loved that show. And I loved so many of the different things behind that. Just this spirit of we ultimately want to do the right thing. We're ultimately trying to do the right thing. And I'm wondering if there was that show or movies or other things that from sort of like entertainment that inspired you, or that, maybe there's some meeting that's the first time that you really kind of have to put your foot down and tell someone what they may not want to hear, and kind of how nervous that might make you until you get through it and realize this is what you have to do for your job.
I don't know if there was a particular movie or anything that sort of like really inspired me. I actually think it was just the real sort of the work that I was doing that inspired me. I'll never forget when I had that moment about being like, this is what I want to do. And it was sitting on the 10th floor of San Diego City Hall as an intern for then San Diego City Councilmember Todd Gloria. And I had just hung up the phone with someone who was a resident who was trying to navigate, the city bureaucracy. And I was successfully able to get them to where they wanted to be. And they were so grateful because they had seemingly tried everything and, called their city council member to try and, help them. And I was able to do that. And, they may never remember me, but I just know that in that moment, I made their life a bit easier. And so that's really where I just kind of sat there and, really took stock of, wow, I could do this every day and get paid to do it. So that's what really inspired me. But I do take a lot of interest in shows and whatnot that have, sort of like the, politics or government as the centerpiece. Famously, it probably isn't the greatest example, but Scandal.
Uh-huh.
Scandal is one. And there's lines in Scandal that I resonate with. And if anyone's watched the show, it's the gladiators in a suit line where they talk about that's what we do. And honestly, I quite honestly think of a lot of political staffers in that sense, that, you have to be a gladiator in a suit, and, you just go out, you have to do the work, and, there's good, bad, or indifferent, that's what we're here to do. But ultimately, it's with all the charge of doing good. And there's other movies too that I've always thought were interesting. The Ides of March with George Clooney, that was always a fascinating one, but that was more campaign related. Yeah, I'm sure I'm missing one too. But yeah, The West Wing is definitely like the quintessential.
You've already touched on this quite a bit, but I want to get into more about the best route to get into the business of politics. Because, you've mentioned being an intern, and you've mentioned the different places that you've worked at. What are just some other pieces of advice that you can give, whether it's a student or whether it's someone who's thinking about changing their career, about the best route to get into politics if they want to be a part of public service?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's internships and campaigns. That's usually how it goes. And I will say that being in this business, you generally don't get to get away from campaigns. It's just a necessary part of it. So when when it's campaign season and you have spare time, that's usually what you end up doing. But a lot of people come in the door through campaigns. They just spend time volunteering and doing, knocking doors, making phone calls. And, when you're there enough, the person who's running sees you and sees your dedication and whatnot. And so then, if they're successful, you may get a phone call, or you can, apply, and then, you become, a name that they're used to. Internships, that's for the official side. So that's when, they are in office, and, that's just a different side of the work, but it's also a way that you can easily start, moving up. Yeah. I mean, I would say to, folks who are considering this, I mean, I think everyone should consider public service. I don't think that there's anything out there that really gives you the gratification that you're making a difference in other people's lives, like public service, and you being able to see that, tangibly every single day, like we do here at the city of San Diego. The mayor often likes to say that, he's got friends, and I have friends as well, who, they're in the business world. And so they get up every day and they push, a stock price, and, good on them. That's not a bad thing. Obviously, we need the market to do well, right? But we get up every day with the sole intention of trying to make our city a better place. And so I think, again, whether it's through campaigns or internships, if you want to do that kind of stuff and make that kind of difference, that's the place to start.
On a lighter note, when you look back on your time at San Diego State, and you were all in, I mean, you were chief of staff, Associated Students.
Yeah.
What are just some of your fun memories about being a college student, and just the friendships that you made, the life lessons that you made? What are kind of some of the things that stand out about attending SDSU?
One of the paramount things for me was that, San Diego State's been in my family for years. My mom went to San Diego State and graduated from there. My father graduated from San Diego State. In fact, that's where they met, was at San Diego State when they were studying.
Oh, a love story. That's awesome.
A love story studying criminal justice.
Okay.
So they met there, and then uncles graduated from San Diego State. So, I mean, it's really been in my bloodline for a long time. So for me to be able to continue that, I felt honored by that kind of every single day when I was on campus. My time with Associated Students was fun. I didn't expect to get the chief of staff job. In fact, I was really like the outsider. I was just kind of, the person who saw this job posting and applied, and I guess they thought I did well. And so I was able to get that job, and so get a little bit more integrated into the campus life. And so that was probably the best time for me, because we got to preside over the opening of the new student union when that happened. So that was great, being able to be the first people to really occupy it. I remember, there were a lot of different things happening on campus, at the time. I think the biggest thing was in joining Associated Students, I really, as a transfer student, found my place in campus. I know for a lot of transfer students, some of them may be listening to this right now, as a commuter student, you can kind of feel a little bit distant and removed from the campus. I just encourage people to find ways to get involved, maybe to stay on campus just a little bit longer, sit in the library for a bit, because you can really make it your home, and it should be that. But, I didn't do Greek life or anything like that. I didn't think anyone in Greek life would accept me, but it's also not with speed. But, I just think there's ways for everybody to get involved. And there are certainly things about college life that you don't miss, midterms, finals, papers, don't miss any of that. But I think from time to time, especially when I've gone to SDSU post-grad, you can just miss being on campus and the environment and all the people there who are kind of working towards the same goal. And so I guess, and by extension, the community that's there. Don't take it for granted. Enjoy it while you can, because eventually you get into the real world and, it's a grind.
You've already touched on a number of alums, including your mom and dad. But one of the things we like to do is brag about other alums from San Diego State and what they're doing. Again, the name of the podcast is Where Are You At? Because we want to let people know where SDSU alums are at and all of the cool things that they're doing from a communication standpoint. So if you have somebody ready that you'd like to brag about, you can go first. I have somebody ready as well. But if you're ready, go ahead, Nick.
I'll let you go first.
All right. So I found this somewhat recently from San Diego State's website from the News Center. And I always try to find someone that I want to brag about that has a tie to the guest. And so I want to brag about Chula Vista Mayor Mary Salas. She became the first Latina to hold the office. One of the things I think that was really cool about her story is that she was a stay-at-home mom. And then after her divorce, she decided to go back to school. She started at Southwestern College. She actually took classes with her daughter at the same time. They shared some of the same classes. Then she transferred to San Diego State. She wanted to make a difference in the world, and she's now the mayor of Chula Vista. So Mary Salas, I've never met her. You probably have. I just think it's the coolest story about someone going back to school, doing it with her daughter at the same time, and making us proud in that world.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And she was she's been a phenomenal mayor for the city of Chula Vista. And you may know that she served in the legislature before that. And absolutely, strong woman and a strong Aztec at that. I would just say, with the connections to, there are so many people in government and politics who went to San Diego State. One of the people that, I think, would be good for your show at some point is someone who works in the mayor's office. His name is Stephen Hill. He's a senior policy advisor to the mayor, proud Aztec. He's also, I should say, the longest serving member of what we call the Todd Squad. So he's worked for the mayor the longest on the floor, and he's still doing it. But he's worked for so many elected officials. I mean, is from Lucy Calais to Tony Atkins to Kevin Faulconer to Todd Gloria, and so just the amount of knowledge that he has. From not only just San Diego City Hall, but also the state is really a tremendous asset to our office, and so we're glad that he's a part of our team. Javier Gomez, who is he is another. He and I graduated the same class of 2014. He was in Associated Students with me. He was the vice president of external affairs, and he's got a great story about how he went from marketing to come over to politics. Post-grad. He's now our director of global affairs, so he manages the mayor's international relations. So, I mean, there's just so many people who have chosen to be in public service from San Diego State. And so the only thing that we always say is that we can't be the last. So we hope San Diego State will continue to churn out good people to take up a career in public service.
Well, I'm really glad that you did, because if you were the only one in your class that wanted to pursue a career in public service and political communications, if you wouldn't have done that, then we would have this gap. So I'm really glad that you did. We'll wrap it up here. I always like to let people, finish by any other types of advice that they want to add, or things that I did not ask that you want to make sure that people know about. It can be about attending San Diego State, working for the mayor's office, paths to success in whatever your field might be.
I would just tell anybody listening to keep at it. I know it's hard. I know it's sometimes you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. Once you figure out what it is that you want to do and you set that as sort of your North Star, work every day towards it. Find those ways that you're making progress towards that goal. Another thing to do is to network, to kind of the point that you were making about, certainly my trajectory. You never know where people are going to end up in this world. And so that's where I always say, don't burn any bridges, be kind to everybody, because you just never know where people are going to end up. One of the things that I always try to do is that as much as, any of us are moving forward in our careers, we've got to be, also the people who are trying to uplift others and get them to where they want to be. So I say, keep dreaming, keep fighting, keep believing. You're going to be fine. You're going to make it. And your best days are still to come.
That's awesome advice. And we'll leave it and we will end it right there. All right, Nick, you are a very busy man. Thank you so much for carving out time from your busy schedule to talk about the Aztecs and your career. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I think our students did as well. Thank you once again, Nick.
Well, grateful for the opportunity and anything for San Diego State.
All right. Once again, that is Nick Serrano. He is the Deputy Chief of Staff for San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. This is the Where Ya At podcast. We like to remind people at the end of every episode, get involved in the university, whether it's the School of Journalism and Media Studies, whether it's political science, whatever it is. Give back to the school that helped you. You can mentor, you can speak to classes, you can donate money. There's a lot of different ways to get involved so that you can pay it forward as well. I'm your host, Josh Suchon. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where Ya At podcast. This is Amy J. Smith from the class of 98. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and the artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know, where ya at? Tell us about your career. Get involved in the department. You can donate your time or your money. You can mentor students. You can speak in the classroom, in person or Zoom. You can provide internship opportunities to students. Help us grow the department. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs!